Hey everyone, I'm Jill Jones, Lab Manager at Ag Explorer. Every day I get to witness firsthand how all of our work in the lab directly supports and connects with your efforts in the field. It's a constant reminder that good science and strong agronomy go hand in hand. That's why on today's episode of From the Field, we're taking a closer look inside the plant, specifically how plants respond to stress and how PGRs can play a critical role in helping keep plants healthy and productive, even under pressure. Dr. John Murphy is taking us on the road this time, speaking to experts and growers on how to help plants thrive even when times are tough. It's a great episode, and it starts now.
Hey, well, welcome and thanks for joining us for another edition of From the Field. You're going to find us today down in the beautiful state of Florida. Got some beautiful sun. Jay, a little bit too much humidity for John.
That's right.
But Jay, tell me a little bit about where we are in Florida.
So we're in North Florida, specifically Live Oak. So we're probably literally 25, 30 minutes south of the Georgia line.
Okay.
So just starting into the bend, depending on the part of the state. So I mean, just from the vertical part to the horizontal part.
That's a good description.
That's right. So it kind of gets right there in that bend, but probably 30 miles north of the beaches. So up here, we actually have some agriculture going on close to the beaches.
Definitely, and so just for fun, when we think Florida, I think specialty crops and I think beaches.
That's right.
But there's been some beautiful crops that we're on today, and we're going to be on in the next few days.
So probably we regrow corn. We got some beans. We got peanuts. We got some cotton. We got a lot of cows and pastures, which you've probably seen.
Yep.
So we got a lot of ag and that surprises people.
Definitely. So Jay, today, what our goal is, as you and I have been talking, and as we're getting ready to roll this out, we're talking about how do we really push our crops as we start to move through maturity.
Right.
And I thought that's why it's a perfect time to be down here in Florida.
Right.
As you go a little further north, I know it's been a struggle for planting, but we're moving into kind of those final phases as we're looking at it here. So Jay, when you think agriculture in Florida, what are just some challenges that we have in terms of nutrients, getting those crops growing, and even water?
So from a nutrient, let's just talk the nutrient part first. I mean, so especially for this part of Florida, and kind of it changes as you move through Florida.
Yep.
Here in this part, a big thing for us is nitrogen management. I mean, so we're right here by the Swanee River, and so the water quality is a huge issue. So the state has enacted what they call a BMAP, which is a Basin Management Action Plan, and they're trying to get the farmers in this area to reduce their total tons of nitrogen applied by 20 tons, or 20 million pounds in the next 20 years. So that's a big hurdle to try when you've been growing a crop with a set amount and you've been doing it successfully at that amount. And now they say you got to cut it back. You've got to start managing your crops, right? So with that comes challenges of, obviously we don't have much of a soil. Our CECs here are probably, from a 3 to a 7, but there's no 7s here. We're probably 3 and 4s right here. Yep. So trying to manage your nutrition in that kind of soil and hold it here is tough. That's a challenge.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because it's a challenge, but we know if we want to get to the end of the season and we want to finish well, we have to start well.
That's right.
And it's all about that management season long. And if you guys have been watching our From the Field, you understand we've gone all the way from foundation to establishment. Last time we were on architecture, how are we growing the plant? And this time we're talking about how are we going to manage it all the way through.
That's right.
But if we want to manage it strong all the way through, it really matters how we started. But let's talk about how did we get here, right? You talked about nitrogen, you talked about phosphorus, right? We talked about timings for those type of things. But let's talk also some micros. I think oftentimes when we go through and we grow plants, we do NP and K,
right?
But we oftentimes aren't really talking about, well, what's going to give me success on our leaf in terms of those micros. So let's talk a little bit about what are we doing as we're going through.
Well, so a big part that I've seen this year in this part of the state has been really kind of eye-opening. This year, we've seen a lot of boron deficiency. And that comes, I was going to see there's some minor zippering on the leaves, and so that, I mean, we've seen that a lot this year. So boron's been a big component this year. Manganese has been a big, and then zinc. I mean, those are ones that I've really seen, and this year too, sulfur. So those are some 3 or 4 big minors that I thought about that have really impacted this area and are popular or common across the state, that we're shorting and got to correct somehow.
Definitely. So let's jump on those, right? When we're talking boron, we're talking tenths of a pound per acre, right? On a corn crop like this. Sulfur, we're talking probably 25 pounds as we get up through there. But let's kind of focus on these small amounts, right? So as we look at this leaf right here, beautiful leaf, they've done a great job taking care of it, right? Capturing a lot of sunlight.
Right.
But as we're moving into late season, really what our goal is to capture as much sunlight as we can, turn that into a sugar, and transport that right down here to the ear. That's because we set the plant off for great success, but we have to figure out how we're going to finish it.
That's right.
So when we think boron, right? Boron early season helps us grow up, but boron right now is helping us transport. It's helping us transport everything from this massive, beautiful leaf down the stem into this ear.
That's right.
And so if we have a late season boron deficiency, we can really be setting back what we're going to be putting in this ear. How have you seen guys apply boron?
So several different ways. This girl right now, they're actually utilizing, they got a wide drop rig this year. So they're actually able to apply with that rig 2 methods. They can actually put it in their wide drop and band it with their nitrogen, so it's soil applied, but they also have the ability to also put it on and spray it on, because it's a high drop, high boil with drops. They can spray it on, and then the common in this area is airplanes.
Definitely. So the nice thing about it is the plant needs it all season. We can put it on different ways, just as long as we're meeting that demand.
Yeah, we actually had a guy, not this, but last season, applied it through a pivot. It did work. Nice. It took us about 7 days to see it through a tissue sample. But applied it in a pivot with a pretty high volume of water, and it still worked.
Awesome. And then let's just hit sulfur, right? Sulfur is something industry-wide we haven't really started to talk about till the last couple of years.
That's right.
We know we need a decent amount, 25 to 35 pounds probably. It's really hard to manage in the soil. It moves just like nitrogen. But when we think about sulfur, sulfur does a couple of key things. It helps us with chlorophyll formation, so it gives us this nice green color.
That's right.
Which again goes back to our grain fill. How long can I keep this plant growing to keep putting starch right here in this corn kernel? So when we think about sulfur, Jay, what are you seeing in terms of how are we putting it on? Do we put it on all up front? Do we need to be splitting it? What are you seeing?
I think the guys that are getting really good at managing sulfur, a lot of guys, so when they're doing their, early on when they're doing, so this guy again is doing a lot of his nitrogen through liquid. So he's using 28005, so it's got sulfur with it. So obviously he's getting some there. When they came back, a lot of guys, when they're starting to do their potash applications, they're using K-Mag.
Okay.
So they're getting sulfur and magnesium through that. And then and that's the main ways the guys are getting it. But then another option you have is, like, there's some products that have sulfur in them. So they can be foliar applied or applied again, through a wide drop application and get it out, or again through an airplane.
But it's about timing, right? We want to put it on when the crop needs it.
That's right.
Now, as we've kind of thought about it, we could jump into more on NPK, sulfur, all the micros, but we've done a great job of getting the plant to this point, right? We can't have leaves that look like this and not have done a great job. But the question becomes now, how do we push it to that finish line, right? I think about crop farming as a marathon, right? You have to start, and you have to start strong, but you got to stay strong in the middle, and you really have to be strong at the end.
That's right.
So when we think about some of the stresses, I honestly think, man, Florida gets all the rain it ever needs. But you guys face some stresses just like the rest of the United States.
Yeah, so Florida's fickle, especially being right here by the Gulf. I mean, you'll see a blob of rain coming on the radar and think, man, we're going to get hammered. But as it comes off that Gulf and hits the panhandle, it just dissipates and goes away. So, you're planning, like, these guys are using moisture probes, and they'll try to watch, again, as we've talked about in the past, fill their pockets up and fill that bank of water up in storage to have it there for the roots to pool. So if they see a rain event coming, because they're trying to manage nitrogen and water, they may back off that irrigation to try to build a storage bank to hold it. But then when that storm falls apart as it approaches, they've got to get back on the throttle and just pour it to it. So, but guys are managing that with these moisture probes to try to do that. But I mean, to your point, when we planted this year, a lot of guys started planting, back early April, and some of the guys that got on our early plant, we had 8 inches of rain. Short, within a day or two of those plantings. So it made it really tough. But then after everything got planted, typical to Florida, it changed. It broke off and got hot for several weeks. So you're trying to overcome all everything. We've got perfect weather down here, but again, we've got humidity, and with that we get a lot of bugs and pests too. So a lot of things come with this environment that are challenging and create, stress that we have to overcome.
So I like that. Stress we have to overcome. So let's talk a little bit about stress management. We know that our crops are going to have some type of stress.
That's right.
Be too much rain, too little rain. Up north, it's been too much rain and too cool, not enough heat units. Down here, you guys have plenty of heat units, let me tell you. But let's think about, how do we keep this leaf nice and open, and how do we mitigate that stress? And when I think about that, a lot of times that's kind of where our PGRs come into play.
Right.
And you and I have been in the industry long enough. I'm not going to call us old yet, but we know our traditional PGRs.
That's right.
But there's a whole other spectrum of PGRs that are all about mitigating stress and keeping the plant going.
That's right.
So the first one I want to talk about is a PGR that's called choline chloride. So first of all, chloride, we always think salt, not a salt.
Right.
But choline chloride, we know we can apply it foliarly. The plant takes it up, and choline chloride is all about keeping photosynthesis going.
That's right.
I mean, today is the perfect day. If our plant leaves are open, if they're still nice and dark green, they're still capturing it, they're pumping everything right here, exactly where we want it. Right? There's been literature out 30 plus years on choline chloride showing that it pushes our window of photosynthesis 21 to 28 days. To me, on this corn crop, 21 to 28 days can do amazing things for this final yield.
That's right.
But then we get really into the newer ones. And I know you guys have been using this down here a little bit. It's GABA, right? And GABA has this really big name, and it scares us, gamma aminobutyric acid.
Right.
But talk to me a little bit about, what have you seen GABA do late season stress reduction?
So it helps to mitigate that stress, because we get, again, with this, we get a lot of cloudy days, and so we get time like today, we got plenty of sun, you can see it, so obviously the leaves are open, they're collecting all the sunshine they can. But I mean, when we put that GABA out there, it just helps the crop overcome these cloudy days. We're still able to keep the leaves open when it gets hot. And we have we've been told to get rain all week, but we didn't get a lot. Now we're hot and humid. I mean, again, so no fault of the farmers, but they've actually cut the water back. So you see leaves going through, maybe a drought just because of that.
Yep.
This guy, we talked to him a little earlier today. He said he just turned pivot back on. He's been off for 3 or 4 days. I mean, does it look stressed?
No.
No.
Beautiful crop.
So, I mean, the GABA just will get you through those periods of stress, whether it be short-term, long-term, abiotic, biotic, whatever they are. The GABA just provides that stress mitigation to overcome and finish to the end. So instead of that plant stressing and using energy to overcome that stress, send it to the cob.
I completely agree, right? And it's all about finishing strong.
That's right.
You guys started strong, and we've got to make sure we finish strong.
Well, you've come this far. You don't want to mess up at the end, right? As you guys always go back to the football analysis, you run down the whole field, you're at the goal post. You don't want to trip going into the goal line. You want to finish out, right?
You've got to finish it strong.
That's what we're trying to do.
Definitely. You're capturing the value of your investment all season at this point, pretty much.
That's right.
So, Jay, we've switched things up a little bit. In the past, we've gone live from different parts. I put some miles in this week, and I visited with some guys that I consider to be experts in terms of plant management.
Okay.
So I want to invite everybody to come along with me as we head north to the state of Georgia, and I'm going to visit with an agronomist up there, and we're going to talk about making sure we finish as strong at the end as we started.
Right. All right.
Man, in order to bring you the science behind PGRs, plant health, late season stress mitigation, we're putting some miles in. We've been up in Illinois, I'm down in Georgia, we're headed down to Florida. But today I have a special guest as we're talking about the science of agronomics, Michael Piscata down in Georgia. So Michael, first of all, I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man.
Man, thank you, Dr. Dunn, for having me.
Hey, so one thing I first of all learned is everyone wants to know, what is agriculture like wherever we are here in Georgia. So take a little bit of time. I know you have a lifetime of experience here. Let me know, what are the crops? What does it look like?
Well, it's stressful everywhere right now. So, Georgia's no different than that. We grow about 1 million acres of cotton in Georgia, give or take some. We grow about 700,000 acres of peanuts. Georgia is the peanut state, along with some other P words, poultry, peaches, pine trees. We grow a lot of things in Georgia, so there's a big diversity. A lot of people don't really think about the diversity that's here in the state of Georgia, but we have some really innovative growers. Despite all the challenges, we're still trying to make it through, and we're trying to stay optimistic right now. So there's a lot of stress, economic stress, weather stress, plant stress, but what we're trying to do is make it through, just like everybody.
You said 2 key words that I think just resonate with everyone: stress and challenges, right? And it can be stress at the farmer level, it can be stress at the plant level, it can be challenges with the environment. But let's jump on there, because that's really what we're focusing on. And I mean, we've been visiting for just a little bit, and one thing that we begin to understand is that we have stress on the plants from beginning to end, but we invest so much up front. And when we get into that late season, getting into that reproductive time frame, really I like to think about it as we're trying to capture everything we put into that. So as you think about down here in Georgia, but also just in the area that you've worked in before, what does it look like to capture the value that you put into the plant at the beginning as we move into that reproductive time frame?
Yeah, I've thought about it a lot this past year, about how you start is how you finish. And for me, you do have a lot of investment between planting equipment and between, in-furrow applications that you might have. There's things to really get your root system set up. But then how do you go and how do you finish a crop? You definitely want to finish strong. So you think about things that are starting to come in to be more common. Obviously, we do have some aerial applicators in the state of Georgia, but now we have a lot more drone applications happening. So we're starting to see different tools come to the market with that, different ways to get late season fungicide applications in. We've got a lot of wet weather here in the state of Georgia, just like a lot of parts of the country. Maybe you got a late start on planting. So there's a lot of commonalities in that, but my take is you definitely want to finish how you start.
Definitely. So let's jump on to that then. Let's talk about how do we finish the plant out, right? I love how you say we want to finish strong. And as we think about finishing strong, a lot of times we get to the end of the season and we're all wore out. We don't really want to make another pass. We just kind of want to shut down. Maybe we want to go take a weekend with the family, or the family wants a weekend away. But when we think about how do we finish strong, things that come to my mind that I'd love for us to talk about is, first of all, how do we keep the leaves green? How do we keep photosynthesis? How do we keep chlorophyll? Right? When we think about what drives yield, we can boil it down to two pretty simple things: photosynthesis and how long do I keep that plant alive? So let's talk about how do I keep my leaves going? What are some key things from PGR or a nutritional standpoint that keep my leaves green, keep them photosynthesizing, and keep that plant pushing all the way through?
Absolutely. I like to think about starting off this conversation with supportive micronutrients that we have.
Yep.
And just because we know that so many of them play directly into nitrogen metabolism, we know that they support this nitrogen uptake curve, which we know is exponential, going V8 and beyond for something like corn. Or we know that something like soybeans, that we're going to have diminishing returns over time. That yes, we're pulling nitrogen out of the air, but over time, those root functions and those nodules, they might not be working as strong. So how do you support that from a micronutrient front? And so I look at elements like boron, copper, molybdenum, and I really think that's your first line of defense. Earlier season, people might think about zinc and manganese, but I don't ever lose the focus on, hey, I need micronutrients throughout the entire growing period. And so yes, there's a transition of thought around those micronutrients, but I also think about plant health indicators. As far as how are my plant cells? I think about, if I'm running a race, what kind of meal do I have before I run the race? Do I go out, get Chick-fil-A, or maybe I make a different choice? Maybe I eat some fruit, maybe I drink a Gatorade, maybe I hydrate myself. And so the hydration part of that is something I've thought a lot about. I work with a lot of dryland corn growers, and dryland corn is going to be one of the first things that's really going to show drought stress, just because you can't control that. And sometimes, depending on what your soil conditions are, there's heat overnight, and you're going to lose carbohydrates. And so for me, I think about hydrating that cell. How do I preserve cellular integrity, and how do I keep that plant healthy and green for as long as possible?
Man, I love what you said about micros, right? Because micros, you and I are old enough, at least I am, we didn't used to talk about micros at all, right? Really, if we look back at industry, it's a couple handful of years where we've even talked about it. And some of them that you brought up, let's just say Molly, really, we still don't really say we have a great understanding.
Right.
And sometimes I think we're intimidated by it because the words get really long, and then they form these chemicals inside plants that none of us can pronounce. But let's jump off with this idea of Molly, right? So first of all, when we think micros for the most part are not mobile in a plant. And so I love what you said. We have to have it pre-race, right? But then we have to have it at the end of the race as well. Because it's the key thing when we think about how much money we put into nitrogen on a corn crop at the beginning of the year, but then we don't even efficiently utilize it because we miss a tiny cofactor for an enzyme in late season.
Absolutely.
So when you think about adding Molly to a crop, what does it look like in terms of, we know it, we need it season long, We know we're using it in something that's probably hundreds of an ounce per acre. So how do we get it to a plant in a form that that plant's going to be able to utilize?
Absolutely. Well, for me, I try to simplify things. And I just know by looking at the pH chart that molybdenum is really not soil available.
Yes.
Even though I might make some applications that might have molybdenum impacted on a Y drop application, or even maybe a layback cotton application, I still feel like foliar is going to be my best bet. You know, and so I simplify that for the growers that I work with. And so a foliar moly application, I can see lots of benefit from that. You look at that nitrogen uptake curve, you say, okay, how do I support this? How do I support these enzymes that actually going to build proteins, build sellable grain at the end of the day? You know, so for me, and I don't, you know, down here, I'm thinking peanuts a lot.
Yeah.
And I know that these peanut plants are going to continue to grow, continue to vine, and continue to set pods. And so how do I really push that pod and peg development through the nitrogen synthesis process?
Yep. I love that, right? It doesn't take much, but it's about that timing. And I love that I found someone that loves the demand curves as much as I do.
Try to.
But then let's just jump over to something like boron. I feel like boron's got a little bit more publicity, if we want to say, or it's a little bit more hot topic. Again, though, with how do we get it to the plant? Because we look at a lot of soil tests, you might have 1 to 3 parts per million. And if you put 1 million golf balls right here and only have a boron on one of them, it's hard for the plant to find that.
That's right.
But it's so many key things. Early on, like you were talking, it gives us that growth. Late season, it's mobilization of nutrients and the idea of reproductive success.
Absolutely.
So I want to pose a question to you that I get. We look at a lot of these foliar applications and we might see it has 7.5% boron. Let me ask you a loaded question. Is it enough? And when do I want to put it on?
You know, for me, I just want to be consistent because it's really, when I think about boron, John, what I've always said is that if I have a sea salt that, you know, maybe I put zinc on one end or manganese on the other end, depending on how my plant growth curve is looking, or vegetative versus reproductive. You know, boron fits the middle. It fits underneath that to support things like zinc early season. It fits the manganese whenever you're having, you know, you're transitioning in, and we know those manganese levels are going to drop when we start having heavy bloom set, soybeans and other things. And so what is the middle? Well, boron's the middle. So is there a wrong time for boron? Well, there's probably better times, but what I can say is consistency matters. And so a foliar application, if you're going to make a pass, you know, I work with a lot of retailers that make that kind of recommendation. That they say, hey, listen, we think that based on rain, based on other scenarios, that you would benefit from a boron foliar application. So
definitely, I love that. And it goes back to your race analogy, right? Obviously, I don't run. Obviously, we can tell you do. But you need the water up front, you need it in the middle, and you need it at the end. Right? We have to have it through the whole thing.
You're right.
Yes. So I love where we've been, right? Talking these micronutrients, but I want to take it one step further for you. And so let's talk a little bit about PGRs.
Yeah.
A word that may be kind of like micros, it can scare us a little bit because some of the words get big, and let's be honest, we can't memorize everything that's out there.
Sure.
But when I think about PGRs late season, especially moving into reproductive, there's a handful of them that come to mind.
Sure.
First of all, let's start with choline chloride.
Yes.
Right? Choline chloride, we've known since the 70s that choline chloride stimulates photosynthesis and helps keep that solar panel, if you want to think about it, intact and photosynthesized. So let's talk a little bit about choline chloride then. Right? Why do we want to keep that plant pushing to the end? Why isn't it okay to just say, oh, it's going to go ahead and cannibalize itself? Eventually it will. But what's a benefit that we get from applying choline chloride in that later season to keep that leaf green and keep it pushing?
Yeah, I think about nutrient movement and water movement as the first two things that come to mind.
Definitely.
You know, we've had this hydration conversation going on, but it's not just about water. It's also about the things that are going to flow with that water. I think about potassium and things that could tank when it's late season. People might have heard the potassium late season conversation, but what happens when you have weather that doesn't transpire your plants, or what happens when you have heat that the plant is just trying to hang on to what it's got? Not a whole lot's happening at all. So you want to keep that movement happening. And so because it's not just about water movement, it's about nutrient movement. And the more things that you can do to promote that plant metabolism going during difficult circumstances, it's going to pay off in the late run.
Definitely, and we keep coming back to this idea of stress, difficulty, right? So to me, then it starts coming down to how do we help mitigate that stress?
Yeah.
And you've already brought up one, taxing, right? We always used to think, oh, we're going to put it down with our fall plow down, and we're just going to leave it there. We're going to build it up. You know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
But we don't think about what happens when we don't get adequate rainfall and we don't get the movement of that potassium through the soil profile. I love the smile. Maybe we think the same way. But what else can we help to do to mitigate those stresses, right? Sometimes we think fungicides. So let's talk fungicides down here a little bit. You guys have a lot of humidity. I'm feeling it this morning at 5 a.m.
Absolutely.
So what do you guys do? Let's go from a plant health standpoint as we move later season. What does that look like?
Yeah, there are a lot of fungicide applications. Whether growers understand those or not, whether they're more systemic, sometimes there is a curative element. There's a lot of combination chemistries being used, but there's also things that you want to induce some resistance within the plant too. So there's some tools that are on the market now that induce more resistance to that extend the life of those fungicides. Some of those are pretty well proven and pretty well studied. So I'm not against recommending that for my growers, even if they've never even used a fungicide before. Because what if you're enabling plant benefit based on another beneficial substance versus a fungicide? Maybe you have rust pressure or a disease pressure at late season, maybe you don't. So how do you make that fungicide application pay off? A lot of times there's a lot of benefit in having a tank mix partner with that.
Definitely, and we're kind of getting into those newer things, right? As we think about it, and I've always thought about PGRs. We have the old school 5 that we all learned about in our crop science class, but then there's new ones that are coming out as well. And one of them that I've kind of really focused on in my last year, 18 months, is GABA, right? And I love the abbreviation because the name's really big.
Right.
Gamma aminobutyric acid. We're just going to call it GABA. But GABA is really about 2 things: stress mitigation and fertilization. Right. And that's things that you keep going back to, right? We have to keep things going in the plant, but we have to mitigate that. So talk to me a little bit about why are we so concerned about mitigating stress late season? Let's just do a corn, soybeans. You can jump off on peanuts if you want to. Why do we care about that?
Yeah, I'm gonna go through. There's a couple of ways that stress pops up late season in say Georgia, and some of them are not that familiar with growers because they might be looking at their rain gauge, they might be looking at their outside, whether there's sunshine or not. But what they might not be thinking about is late season soil temperatures. Yes. Crops like potatoes in northeast Florida. That's something that I learned from just talking to extension personnel there, that they're constantly monitoring soil temperatures. And I said, well, why are y'all worried about soil temperatures? The potatoes are growing. I thought they liked the heat. They said, no. Matter of fact, there's a lot of carbohydrates that are lost that transpire from the tuber through the soil into the air. And so basically what we want is temperature differences. We want it to get cooler at night. That way there's less transpiration, there's less water, less carbohydrate loss. And that's really influenced my thinking on things like peanuts. If we're losing below the ground, well, sheesh, what about above the ground? Of course, everybody's focused above the ground. So for me, I've had this dual approach now for about 2 or 3 years where I'm saying, hey, we already have soil probes. We have good ways to find out what the below ground stress is late season for specific crops. Because no doubt, if we have tuber stress, if we have peg stress, if we have, we're going to have root stress. And so how do we keep that plant primed for excellent performance late season?
Man, I love what you're bringing up there because you're talking about how we can always keep learning. And that's one thing I've learned as I've traveled. There's still so much to learn. But we can take information from potatoes and peanuts and we can put it over to corn.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a key thing because it's easy for us to visualize stress in corn and beans, right? Corn, we get tip back. Beans, we get pod abortion, flower abortion. But it's still that same thing. We want to make sure we're mitigating as much as we can.
Yeah.
And it's not one thing. That's what I've really enjoyed about our conversation. It's not just a micro. It's not just a fungicide. It's not just a new PGR like a GABA.
Yeah.
It's how do we put everything together in order to push that late season success.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you a question, and I love asking these questions as I visit with guys. When you think about, if you could give me one or two key things you've learned about keeping that plant alive and pushing it all the way to the end, what would you tell me?
Man, invest in late applications. You know, I think that's a commonality. I think a lot of people say that. A lot of people are being pretty loud about that right now. But I know it's a financial hurdle, you know, and I know right now that a lot of people are making decisions. I look at peanuts where there are differences in strong fungicide programs versus weak fungicide programs, and pretty much everyone is using a fungicide program. But I want to say now, you know, protecting that yield late is as important as ever, because the challenges are going to keep coming, and you really want to, if you're doing a lot up front, you know, don't let that drop off at the end. You know, keep it strong, you know, and let, you know, how you start be how you finish.
Definitely, it's about management all the way through.
Yeah.
Michael, I really appreciate your time. It's been great to know you.
Well, I don't know about you, but anytime I get to sit down with someone like Michael, there's a whole bunch that I get to learn.
Yep. Yes, sir.
And one thing that you notice with Michael is he kept coming back to this idea that we want to make sure that we finish strong, but we've got to start strong to get there, whether it's the micros that we're dealing with or trying to help mitigate some stress.
Right.
But now we're going to put a few more miles on, and we're going to head all the way over to Southeast Illinois. And when I had a chance at Southeast Illinois to sit down with an agronomist that specializes in maintaining that plant health all the way through so that the plant doesn't die early.
That's right.
Because Jay, just like you said, today is the perfect example, and I'm so glad we're here. Look at all the sunlight we can capture when the leaves stay healthy, they're not covered with foliar disease. It really is going to drive that final yield.
That's right.
Hey, well, we're putting some miles in. We were just visiting with you down in Georgia, really talking about how we can utilize PGRs and nutritionals for plant health. And now I'm coming to you from Southern Illinois with two guys I have a lot of respect for. And when you put us all together, we have just a little bit of experience in the ag industry as well. I'm not going to ask ages, but we could probably come up with a few years between us. But I've got Scott Bingman, who's a sales agronomist with Ag Explorer, and then I have Barry Beaupre with Syngenta. So Scott, tell me a little bit about where we are and just kind of the history of agriculture right here.
Sure. We're in Elkville, Illinois, which is over by DuQuoin. We're at a location, Funk Farms in Elkville. Just a little bit, mainly corn, beans in this area, some wheat, quite a bit of wheat. So yeah, we've had our challenges this year. So John, I'm glad you and Barry could come and visit with us on this, talking about the rain, talking about some PGRs, talking about some stress, and a little bit of everything in Southern Illinois. So appreciate you guys coming down to help.
Definitely. And Scott, you and Barry have a pretty long history together. So why don't you introduce Barry to us and kind of tell us about the history you guys have?
Sure. Barry and I have worked together for a long time. Barry's a Syngenta rep in this area. Been down here a long time, Barry. About how long have you been down here?
I've been down here since 1993, so when I started down here.
So Barry and I have seen a lot. We've seen a lot. Mother Nature has came in, and we've seen a lot throughout the years. Nothing's been constant. So Barry, I'm glad to work with you.
Yep, same here, Scott.
Scott, you said a key word. I think let's jump off here. Nothing's been constant. So Barry, talk to me a little bit about what does planting season look like down here this year? And what are some challenges we have already had and some challenges you see going forward this year?
Okay, John. Well, we started out the end of March, first week of April. We had some time that we could run and plant. Some guys got in, got some things planted. This particular farm had about 500 acres of corn in the ground, and then we started getting rain at that first mid part of April, and it really has kept growers out of the field since until about 2 weeks ago. So I've got, from a crop standpoint, I've got some beans and some corns across my geography that got in the field and are at, some corns at the V5, V6 growth stage right now. Beans are approaching second, third trifoliate, and then we've got stuff that's just emerging.
So interesting, the spread, but as you start to think about that and as you talk about it, some things come to mind that we really want to focus on. So first of all is how are we going to manage crops when we're spread out over from that V5, V6 time frame in corn till we're just kind of spiking out of the ground, and we got soybeans that are just getting dropped in, and we got soybeans at the third trifoliate. What does that look like in terms of nutrient management and then disease management?
Okay, I think, and I treat the two crops differently because I think soybeans, for example, pretty much everybody treats their beans. So the early season diseases and things like that are taken care of. The one thing that I like to see in that V2 to V4, V5 growth stage in beans is some type of a nutrient management plan, as well as something that's going to spur root growth in that soybean plant.
Definitely.
And really it's about getting those beans, especially the early planted beans. A lot of times we struggle getting growth out of those right away in that nasty April, mid-May weather where we don't have good temps.
Definitely.
We've got to spur that plant on. We haven't actually seen very good results from putting a fungicide on at that time. I would not recommend a grower would put fungicides on his beans in that early to mid vegetative growth standpoint. It's more about getting root production, getting good root systems established, and about getting that plant and helping that plant grow up.
Awesome. So let's jump back and let's talk about that nutrient management, right? Because we understand managing nutrients, utilizing maybe some PGRs to enhance that growth is really important early on. So around this area, things that come to my mind, obviously, when we think about soybeans and really all plants in general, definitely sulfur, right? We know that we're dealing with sulfur deficiencies. We know that potassium plays a key role. We know that boron plays a key role within that. What are you seeing in terms of applications that are working well?
I think anytime we can get any type of a plant growth regulator in that situation to help that soybean root system establish itself, to get to the nutrients that are in the soil quicker. And then I think anytime we can put anything over the top that's going to kind of give that plant a boost to get it up and get it growing quicker.
Yep, definitely. So the basic agronomics, right? You and I were standing in the shop over there talking, what are we going to discuss? And it all boils down to basic agronomics, right? We have to feed the plant if we want it to do something. So let's walk us through the season just a little bit more then. So let's get us into that maybe later vegetative stage, maybe even moving into early reproductive if we want to on those soybeans. What does disease management look like as we move forward? What are you kind of seeing?
So on soybeans especially, if we're going to stay focused on soybeans, a lot of times the biggest thing I can tell growers is we have been historically spraying our beans too late. We go out there, we think we got to hit it perfect at R3 growth stage. We kind of mess around for a week, or we don't get stuff planned out on a timely basis. All of a sudden we're into that R4 application timing. And with our new class of fungicides that are going to last longer and be more effective, we really want growers to start looking at that R2 application, because we're looking at frog eye leaf spot is one of the big ones that we deal with down here. And that's the main one we're going by, but really it's about stress management in that soybeans life cycle.
Definitely. So I want to jump on two things. I love conversations like this. I could do this all day long. So you talk timing, right? You talk that we need to move it up, right? I'm of that time frame. We always talked about that R3 time frame, used to kind of be the traditional. I want to jump into a little bit of the science though of these fungicides, both from the disease management, and then let's move into stress mitigation if that's all right. So you said it's lasting longer. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm scared to say most of the names of what is actually in a fungicide in front of anyone. And I think that as an industry, that scares us a little bit. So walk me through, just in general, why do our fungicides work better now? Why are we getting a longer protection period? And because that's gonna influence our management.
Yeah, well, it's a new class of fungicides that we've come out with, an SDHI technology is what we call it. Basically, it's a brand new class of fungicides. Adepidin is one of the active ingredients that we have in the Miravis brands. You'll hear Miravis a lot in corn, soybeans, and wheat. And it's just going to last longer. It's going to make that plant cleaner and greener. From a technical standpoint, it regulates the plant's ability to utilize moisture during the growing season in tough conditions. It will also help manage diseases at the same point. And the residual on it is going to be about 2x what our normal stuff would have been.
So I love that now, because now it lets us also start talking about what else can we put on with it. Because now that you're encouraging people to move forward more to that R2 time frame in soybeans, there's a lot that's going on in soybeans at R2, right? We're still setting flower. We're getting ready to start setting pods, right? A lot of times we think, man, that's one of the most stressful times in a soybean's life. So when we think about that stress and we think about that we're protecting it from disease, it also brings to mind for me, how are we going to help to mitigate that stress utilizing PGRs and also put some nutritionals in there? So I like to think about kind of the new class of PGRs, right? We all grew up, we had those 5 traditionals.
Yep.
We have a newer kind of class called GABA, right? This big word, gamma aminobutyric acid. Doesn't really matter what the big name is, it's GABA. And GABA really, I think, works well with fungicides because it's about mitigating stress, it's about keeping the plant green, and it's about helping it grow. So when we think about something like a Miravis, can we tank mix it well? Does it mix well with other things? Does it play well?
Yeah, it mixes extremely well with any of the nutritionals and with any of the PGR type products.
So Scott, specific down in this area, right? As we're kind of getting from Georgia up to Illinois, we're gonna get some up in Iowa and Minnesota as well. What have you seen work well in terms of tank mixing around that R2 time frame?
We've got a product called Onward Max that we utilize. It's a low use rate. We help with, especially on beans, with pods not aborting.
Yep.
We help with pod fill.
Yep.
We help with test weight. There's multiple things that late season PGR that we can add as a simple tank mix.
Definitely, and it's simple, it works well, and as I hear us all talk, it's all working together, right? We use
Sure.
that word synergy,
Yep.
but it just means 1 + 1 = 3 by the time we get to the end of the day. So walk me through a little bit of corn then. I know there's a lot of discussion the last couple years. Do I want to be making a 1-pass fungicide? Do I want to be making a 2-pass fungicide? If I'm making 2 passes, do I use a half rate? Do I use a full rate? What's my timing? Barry, kind of what are your thoughts specific to this area and then just around the United States in general?
Okay, I would say in our neck of the woods, in our geography down here, we have a lot more humidity than they do. My home farm is up in Kankakee, Illinois, northern Illinois, and then I've got some buddies that farm up in Wisconsin and the Dakotas. It's a big difference from a humidity standpoint when they come down to visit in mid-July. So we have a lot more disease pressure. Our soil types can get a little droughty at times, a little bit quicker than what they do. We just don't have the water holding capacity. So our corn crop is going to go through more stresses down here than what they will up north.
Definitely.
That's a scientific fact.
Yep.
So where we have done on-farm trials, and this isn't our trials, but on-farm trials, a 2-pass fungicide system works extremely well.
Okay.
And especially with the amount of tar spot.
Yeah.
I don't want to get tar spot tunnel vision, but tar spot has been more of an issue down here than what we originally thought it would. We thought the heat would kind of nip it in the bud and we wouldn't have an issue,
Yep.
but it's proven that wrong and incorrect. So it's something that we've got to manage or look out for and make sure we pay attention to. But it's really, when I look at my high yield growers and my fungicide passes, it's going to be a 2-shot fungicide, and I want full rates all the time.
Okay.
I do not want a half rate, because actually when you look at it, diseases can develop resistance to fungicides faster than weeds can.
Wow, that's interesting to know.
Yeah, that's a proven fact. That's why in the vegetable market, you'll see them talk about rotating your fungicides every single time, rotating to different AIs.
That's interesting. So let's kind of talk about handling disease though, because I think a lot of times we want to wait to handle a disease till we walk out and we see tar spot. Now, I mean, we were in some fields last year, it looks like you took black spray paint, on those. Why do we need to make sure we're getting those fungicides out in front of that disease? Why can't John wait until I see tar spot and then call Barry? It's like, hey, I've got tar spot, I've got a problem, what should I put on it?
Right. So there's a latent period on any disease, whether that's southern rust, whether it's gray leaf spot, northern corn leaf blight, tar spot. All of them have a period of infection in the plant. Then you start to get symptoms anywhere from 14 to 21 days later. And we'll talk about, we as reps talk about the curative properties of our fungicides.
Yep.
Well, it's the fact that when you see it, we can't cure it at that point in time.
Yep.
So we can cure it with the curative products as long as it's not visibly seen by the naked eye. So we've got to hit it within that 14-day period before the disease actually develops pustules on the outside of the plant, on the leaf surface.
Definitely, because once it's there, we
It's
have
there.
it in there, right? And it's a struggle from that point on.
Yeah, especially with tar spot and southern rust. Those are the two that, And really, for our area, southern rust still is my main concern.
Yep.
Blowing in from down south.
Definitely. So let's talk timing then. When do we want to be timing these fungicide passes? So maybe specifically even that second one, right? We talked that we want to make sure we're running full rates. What does that timing look like in corn in this area?
So on my first passes, anywhere from that V5 to V8 timing, depending upon what you're going after, I want my fungicide on then, and only because you're going to get water use efficiency out of the new class of fungicides, stress mitigation. You're going to regulate the stomates, which regulate the amount of water that's transpired out of the plant.
Yep.
It's also going to regulate and decrease ethylene production, which is what causes the plant to go back.
So Barry, you brought up a key word, kind of a hot topic word, ethylene production, right? One thing with ethylene production is it just tells the plant it's time to shut down. It's kind of time to slow down. And when we think about what drives yield, it doesn't matter if we're talking corn, soybeans, wheat, specialty crops. We can boil it down to two things: how much photosynthesis the plant does, and then how long grain fill happens. So let's start with, how do we enhance photosynthesis? And I think it goes back to two things you had there: how we're going to manage disease early, that V5, V6 time frame, but also how we're going to mitigate that stress early on as well.
Yeah, I mean, the whole focus is to keep that plant cleaner and greener longer, because that's your production facility. You want your production facility running at 100% capacity. That's the goal, is to keep that plant greener longer.
Yep.
And that's what the fungicides do. The new class of fungicides, like a Triva Pro in corn, or a Miravis Neo in corn, and like a Miravis Top in beans.
Yep, definitely. So we're setting that stage, right? We like to talk about agriculture. We can't just drop it and forget about it, right? We have to manage it. So we know we've talked that importance early on, right? Where that corn, we know we have to treat disease. We know we still want to mitigate stress, because let's be honest, it's been wet here this spring, but in 2 weeks it could turn off dry.
Yeah, we've had, really, when you look at the last 3 years, the month of June has been extremely dry and extremely hot.
Yep.
So we've been blessed the last 3 years to get a rain around the 4th of July that was really a crop saving rain.
Definitely.
And kept things going. But the fungicide applications that took place during that first couple weeks of June bought us time to get into that July rain.
Definitely. And Scott, let's stay with this early season. We think about mitigating stress, and I completely agree. We've got to take care of disease. These fungicides have great properties. Down here, though, we've also utilized some other products, right? This new class of PGRs with Architect.
Sure.
And why are you putting Architect on, and what time are you putting it on?
The Architect goes on the first pass post. We like to go early on it, that V3 to V6 application timing.
Yep.
Try to get as much on that leaf surface as we can.
Definitely.
Yes.
So now let's take us to the end of the season, right? That's where we all get excited. We have this big part in July where we're like, all right, we're tired, we're ready to go, let's see something. Take me now to the kind of that VT time frame, that R1 time frame in our corn, maybe that R5, R6 time frame in our soybeans. What does it look like there for managing crops and mitigating stress?
The main thing we wanted to do is keep the ear leaf, so the leaf right above the ear and above, healthy, clean. We want to make that corn plant feel as good as it possibly can. And so we're really talking about managing southern rust and tar spot at that point in time. Hopefully you've already gotten your full rate of fungicide on in that V8 time frame, V6, V8, V9, and then you're following it with another R1. The corn plant and the soybean plant as well. The soybean plant at R4 and the corn plant that once we go into reproductive stages on both of those, we're going to be working as hard as they have in their life. And so it's important that we make that plant feel as good and robust as we possibly can, and stop anything negative from happening, because we're really about just stopping the negatives. It's not like we're going to increase yield at this point in time, but we're going to preserve it, hopefully maintain as many kernels as possible. On the soybean side of things, retain pods, pods and beans in the pod, retain flowers, make everything come to fruition at 100% of what it's capable of doing at that point in time.
Definitely, and it's about that idea of keeping the plant healthy, and we go back to it. We're like a broken record. We have to mitigate that stress and keep it green and growing. And so when we think about that stress, in corn we can easily see it, right? It's tip back in corn.
Yep.
We see it every single year. In beans, it becomes scary because we can abort 50 to 80% of all the flowers and pods we ever put on a bean plant. So Scott, what are we doing then when we think about PGRs? What are some PGRs that we can be applying in that late season that are really going to help to mitigate stress, but then like Barry's been talking about, keep the plant green and keep it growing? What are some of those PGRs that we see?
Sure. We've got a product, like I said a while ago, a product called Onward Max, which is a late season PGR, not to be confused with the early season of Architect. This is put on with a fungicide or with an insecticide with that late season timing. This Onward Max is a low use rate of 6.4 ounces. It's basically a cost per acre is a little bit of, a couple bushel of corn, about 3 bushel of beans, something like that in that cost way. It has kynotin in it, chlorine chloride, kynotin, and GABA in it.
Yep.
So it has 3 major components. What we do is help reduce stress. We help add test weight.
Yep.
We help, as Barry was talking about, fill out that pod a little bit, reduce tip back on corn, help that cob go ahead and finish growing a little bit. Just kind of, it basically tells it we're not done growing yet. So it does multiple things, and it's again a low use rate.
And the thing I enjoy about talking about all of this is it's all backed by science, right? We've known about kynotin, choline chloride for years, right? We learned about it going through school, that kynotin enhances reproductive success, right? As we're looking at it. Choline chloride is great at maintaining photosynthesis. We've talked about choline chloride since the 80s, right? And then that new class, though, it's that GABA, which goes to stress mitigation and helping to mobilize.
Right.
But Barry, like we always talk about, if we want to ask the plant to do something, we have to pay it.
Yep.
And I think about it that way in terms of nutrients, is how I'm paying my plant. Let's stay in that late season. What are some key nutrients that we need to be adding to corn and or soybeans to really help that plant finish out?
I think, from our farm at home and down here, I think boron is a key one at that stage.
Yep.
I think nitrogen on the corn side of things, it is really going to need a little extra shot of nitrogen if we can give it that at that point in time once the corn starts tasseling and from there on. So those would be the 2 key ones that I would look at.
I agree with you, right? That boron, I think, is becoming more key across the United States, especially as we drive our yield a little more. It's mobile in the soil profile, right? We know that our soil tests aren't always really good at predicting how much is there anyway, but it's easy to get in because we can mix it with PGRs like Scott was talking about. I can mix it with a fungicide like you've been talking about, and we're really kind of getting it across the board, setting it up for success.
Yep.
So Barry, as we kind of wrap this up, I'm going to put you on the spot. What are a couple of key things that we need to pay attention to as we're moving into this mid to late June timeframe?
I would look at what does the 2 to 3 week weather outlook. What's our forecast? I know weather people can't forecast, as good as or as well as we'd like them to, but you can see some trends. And what's the 10 to 15 day outlook? Are we going to get hot and dry? Then I would make an application of a fungicide, a PGR, and a nutritional just to help that corn or soybean plant feel like, hey, things are okay. It's not as bad as what it is outside, to keep it going and growing. I would probably leave the fungicide out on a soybean early application, but I would include a fungicide, a good fungicide on that early corn application. And then make sure you're paying attention to, from a corn standpoint, what is tar spot in the earlier planted areas? What's tar spot doing? Is anybody seeing anything? And then pay attention to what the southern rust outlook is coming up from the south, from Texas, because southern rust will blow in, and we can kind of track that pretty good about if the moisture's there and we've got decent temps. Once we get into that VT time frame, where's southern rust at in Oklahoma? Where's it at in Arkansas? Those places.
Watching it blow up and blow in, right?
Blow up. Yep.
Definitely. So it all boils down to keeping the plant green, driving photosynthesis, reducing stress, right? And it's kind of become my favorite saying, if we follow that solid agronomics, that's where the real economics come into play.
Yep.
We have to make sure that we're doing both if we're going to see the result in the end.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Barry, I really appreciate
Thanks,
your time.
John. I appreciate
Scott,
it.
it's always been good.
Thank you.
Well, I tell you, just like talking with Michael, when you get to talk with somebody like Barry, who has a lifetime of experience, keeping these healthy and keeping them green, there's so much for us to learn.
That's right.
So I hope as we kind of think about season-long management, and as we're moving in Florida down toward the end, I know my friends up north, they're like, John, we're just getting started. But we want to go back to your football example.
Right.
We want to make sure we have the plan to go from the kickoff all the way through the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And so many times it's those little things in between. It's if the block happened, did we keep the running back on his feet?
Did you make your first down?
Did we get
you
the
can come
first
all the way
down?
down and you can stumble. So you got to create everything through the whole season. Right?
Yep.
You've got to block and tackle the whole way down.
You have to take it, and if you're willing to manage it season long, we drive this final yield just like what we've been talking about here.
That's right.
But Jay, it's not going to be a full from the field if we don't talk some education plots. So now let's actually kick it up to Iowa to our regional agronomist, Ben Westendorf, who's going to talk a little bit about research and our education farm that we have going on.
Well, thanks, John. Yeah, welcome to the education plot here in central Iowa. Things are looking really pretty good today. We're finally warming up. The wind isn't blowing us around like crazy. This corn is really starting to find its legs. That probably makes sense if you're a farmer. To everybody else, it's like, well, what the heck? Corn doesn't have legs. It kind of seems like this corn is moving out of the ugly duckling stage, which is what I like to call it. It's finding different amounts of nutrient sources, taking off, looking like streaks. We're finally moving through that. We're starting to get some even looking corn out here. So let's talk about what we've done so far to this corn to help this plant at the establishment phase get up and going. We went ahead and treated with 3 ounces per unit of GrowPack AI, treated right into the planter as it was coming out of the tender. We then let that corn come up, and at the B5 stage, we went and made an Architect pass, which fits perfectly what we're talking about today. We're talking about managing stress with the PGR. The one that we used was, like I said, Architect at 1 quart, and it's got that GABA in it. When we applied it, we were looking at some abiotic stress, not from heat, kind of on the opposite end with some cold stress. This plant wasn't growing a whole lot. It was growing, just wasn't doing a lot of it. So we wanted to mitigate that stress and tell that plant, it's all right, you're going to see better conditions. Set those extra kernels around, and let's get to going. So right now we're right around that V6 stage. And here last week we went through and made a pass of side dress nitrogen. The stuff on the treated acres went ahead and got Contain Advanced at 1.5 quarts per ton on our 32%. So that's a really good thing about Contain Advanced is we treat the ton, not the acre, because we weren't running a very high rate of 32% here. So if we were running a traditional stabilizer, that amount wouldn't have remained the same. But on Contain Advanced, we treat the ton, not the acre. So that's really good here when we're running a lower rate of 32%. So what's next on this plot? We're gonna let this corn grow for a while. Things are really looking pretty good. We got about a ½ inch of rain last night here in central Iowa. Things are really shaping up to be a pretty good year, I think. So here probably at the fungicide time, right around that R1, right around corn, we're gonna come. Oh man, I said no wind, but here we go with a little bit apparently. Around that R1 time when we're putting fungicide out here, we're going to come back with a late season PGR. In this situation, we're going to be with Onward Max on this corn right on that R1. We're also going to feed it some nutrition that it needs in that late season. So we're looking at some potassium, looking at some boron, maybe give it some additional sulfur to keep that plant green and keep it photosynthesizing as long as possible and help with grain fill. So that's what we're looking at doing here at the plot in central Iowa. Just to recap, start with GrowPack AI. We hit it with Architect. We also fed it some needs at that time. I think I forgot to mention potassium, sulfur, boron. The plant, like I said, it was just looking like that dull green. It wasn't getting any chlorophyll formation going. So I did spike in a pint of sulfur, XR5 sulfur at that Architect application there at that V5. So that's what we've done, and that's what we're going to be doing. So with that, I'll kick it right back.
Hey everyone, I'm Bryce Erdman with Ag Explorer. If you stuck around for this one, you heard some great information. Dr. John Murphy hit on the PGRs and what they actually do. You saw how growers are managing stress in the field, applying practical tools to keep their crops moving forward, even when conditions are pushing back on them. But we've got one more in the tank. On August 13th, the final push takes us to the last stretch of the season. Yield decisions, harvest timing, nutrition. It all comes down to what you need to do next. Make sure you're subscribed to Ag Explorer's YouTube channel so you're ready when it drops. See you on the other.